Hello there, it's Mark here, and I'll be honest with you, this is a video I didn't want to make. Not because I don't love a good Excel debate, but because people get weirdly territorial about whether to use XLOOKUP or VLOOKUP. But I feel as if I have to make this video because I think in all of the arguments, one of the key points is missing. So today we're going to keep things simple, and we're just going to compare two scenarios. And once you understand those, it should be clear about which function is best. So if you're ready, let's get started. Let's start with the absolute value lookup scenario. This is where we know exactly the values that we want to return the result from. And if somebody inserts a new column in the middle, the position of those values moves, and our formula needs to shift to follow those values. Here in Excel, we have some cells with values for item, size, units, and value. And our goal is to look up the value Charlie from our item column and return the values from our units column. In cell J6, I'll type equals XLOOKUP, opening bracket. For our lookup value, this is the value that we want to find. This is going to be Charlie. Then we have our lookup array. This is the values that we want to look up in 2. We're going to use our values from B4 to B11. Our next argument is return array. These are the values that we want to return from, and we want to return the corresponding position from cells D4 to D11. Now XLOOKUP has other optional arguments, but we're not looking at those in this video. That means I can simply close the bracket and calculate, and that returns the value of 6, which is the correct value. Now what happens if somebody inserts a new column? I'll select those, go to Insert, Shift to the right. As you can see, our formula shifts as well. We are still looking up the value from our units column, and it's still returning the value of 6. That means XLOOKUP handles this scenario perfectly. It's simple, it's exactly what we want. So now let's turn our attention to the VLOOKUP function. We've got exactly the same scenario. In cell J8, I'll type equals VLOOKUP, opening bracket. The lookup value is Charlie. Then we have our table array. That's the second argument. We want all of the values from B4 to E11. Next, we have our col index num. We want 3 because we want our units column. Then we have our range lookup, and we want false because we want an exact match. I'll close that bracket and calculate, and that returns 6, exactly the same result as XLOOKUP. But what happens if we insert a new column? I'll select those cells, right click, insert, shift right, OK, and as you can see, our VLOOKUP is no longer returning the correct value. It's now returning the value from our size column. So VLOOKUP isn't ideal in this situation. But a common workaround is to use the match function to calculate the column index number. Let's edit our formula. Rather than the 3, we're going to use the match function. And the value that we want to match is the word units. And we want to find that in our column headers. Units is the third column. That means it will return 3 as a number. Now for the last argument of match, we want to perform an exact match. I'll close that bracket and calculate. It now returns 6 again. So what happens if we insert some new columns? I'll insert those, shift right. As you can see, everything still works correctly. But here's the thing, that's a different scenario. That's a two-way lookup because we're now anchoring on 2 different axes. That's a different thing altogether. So by adding match, it's no longer an absolute value lookup at all. It's a two-way lookup. But there is another way. Rather than using match for our col index num, we're going to use hstack for our table array. Let's edit our formula. Rather than referencing B4 to E11, we're going to use hstack, opening bracket. For our table array, we're going to create our own table using our item column and also our units column. I'll close that bracket at the end. and then for our column index number, we know that the values we want to return are always in position 2. So I'll enter a 2. I'll calculate. That now returns 6, which is exactly the same result as before. And let's now add a column. If I insert those cells and shift right, everything still works. And that's because we created our own array for the table array argument. That means we can insert as many columns as we like and our formula won't break. This also gets over the issue of VLOOKUP not being able to look up to the left because we can stack our array together in any shape that we like. So overall, in terms of an absolute value lookup, which is the best? I think we can say that XLOOKUP is simply easier. It has fewer functions, fewer arguments, and less hassle. Yes, VLOOKUP can do it, but XLOOKUP is just easier. Let's now flip things around and look at relative value lookups. In this scenario, we don't want our lookup range to change when somebody inserts a new column. For example, this is where we always want the nth column relative to a lookup column, and we're going to start with VLOOKUP. In this scenario, we have a table with item, and then we have the current month values. After that, we have the previous month, and then the month before that, and then the month before that. And in this scenario, we always want to look up the value from last month, which is the month minus 1. So let's start here in cell J6 equals VLOOKUP, opening bracket. Our lookup value is going to be Charlie. Our table array is going to be from B4 to F11. The column index number is 3, and we want an exact match, so that will be false. I'll close the bracket and calculate. That returns the value of 95, which is the correct value. Now let's suggest that we want to roll this forward for another month. That means month 3 rolls off the end, all of our values move along, and we get new values for our current month. So in effect, we've inserted a new column. Guess what? Our lookup value has changed. It was 95, it's now 57, but if we want to look up the value from last month, that is the correct value. We want the value of 57. VLOOKUP achieves that with ease because that's what it was designed to do. So now let's take a look at the same scenario, but this time using XLOOKUP. In cell J8, I'll type equals XLOOKUP, opening bracket. The lookup value is going to be Charlie. Our lookup array is going to be our items, and then our return array is going to be our month minus 1. I'll close that and calculate. Yes, it returns 95, which is currently the correct value. But once again, let's suggest we roll forward for another month. I'll just update these values and then copy and paste in our new values. And as you can see, XLOOKUP doesn't return the correct value. It now returns the value from month minus 2. And that's because XLOOKUP is an absolute value lookup, whereas VLOOKUP is a relative value lookup. So we've got a problem, but we can solve this using the index function. I'll press Ctrl Z to get all of our values back. Rather than returning the values from D4 to D11, we need to return the values from our entire range, which is B4 to F11. Then we need to wrap this in the index function. That means it will take the array that's returned, and then we can return a specific position. Let's say we want position 3. I'll close the bracket, I'll calculate. That now returns 95, and now let's go through the same update process. Month 3 no longer exists. We'll move across our values. We'll then copy and paste in our new values. And as you can see, our XLOOKUP now returns the correct result. So in this scenario, we can work around the issue that XLOOKUP doesn't return the values that we need. So in this scenario, where we want a relative value lookup, which is easier? I think we can genuinely say that VLOOKUP is the easier function. It has less arguments, less functions, and is just less hassle. Okay, so what's the verdict? Well, it's clearly not about which function is better. That's the wrong question. It's about diagnosing your scenario. whether it's an absolute or relative situation, and then choosing the right function. XLOOKUP was designed for absolute value lookups. VLOOKUP was designed for relative value lookups. So let's just pick the function which is designed to do what we want. Let me illustrate this point. If you're trying to open the battery compartment of a kid's toy and you need a screwdriver, but all you've got to hand is a table knife, you might decide to use it. It's not what it was designed for, but it will work. However, if you've got a table knife and a screwdriver sitting right next to you, surely you'd pick the screwdriver because that's the right tool for the job. And the same applies here. Use the function that matches your scenario. The thing is that the vast majority of use cases are actually absolute value lookups. Therefore, we should be using XLOOKUP more than VLOOKUP. Not because it's a better function, but because it matches our scenarios better. Now, I'm sure some of you are saying, but XLOOKUP won't work on older versions of Excel. And yes, that's true. But even Microsoft doesn't support those older versions of Excel anymore. So the number of scenarios where that's the case should be disappearing fast. But if it is a real concern, the closest alternative to XLOOKUP that will work on older versions of Excel is the index and match combination. So it's worth taking the time to learn those functions in detail. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.